Welcome back, guys, to another Downtown Rams podcast. It's episode 233. I still can't believe that. We've been doing a lot of episodes, but this one's a little different. In the wake of the Rams signing Steven Jackson to a one-day contract to retire on St. Louis Los Angeles Ram. I don't care where you come from, you're a Ram. With that being said, Steven Jackson will be a Ram forever. And so Alexis and I had an idea. We were going to try doing our own all-time Rams starting lineup. I love the idea. I think it's going to be fun. We're going to kind of go through just talking about all different eras and everything and putting together the all-time Rams starting lineup. First off, Alexis, I want to talk a little bit about your thoughts on Steven Jackson and basically retiring a Ram.
I mean, I love it. I think it's well deserved. I think he's somebody who, uh, you know, basically carried the team for the entire time he was on the team. I mean, let's face it, he wasn't on the best Rams roster of all time. And yet he still found ways to outperform many other running backs in the league. He was insane to watch. He was a guy who you loved to watch because you could tell he gave 110% every play. And he is honestly one of the, I think, hardest working Rams of all time. And I think it was well deserved. I think it was really special, not only for us as fans, but for him to get to retire Ram. And I love the move.
Yeah, I do too. I think you definitely hit the nail on the head there. Steven Jackson, before, all this beast mode with Marshawn Lynch, Steven Jackson was beast mode. And I feel like, you look at every running back in this league and, albeit there are, power runners, but I don't think anything is quite like Steven Jackson in today's era. I mean, I think that's the craziest thing is basically his style of running has stood the test of time. And I mean, obviously he didn't retire that long ago, but it's just, there's nobody like him. When you go back and you watch his highlights, there's nobody that runs the football like him, basically carries 10 other guys to the first down marker, 11 yards, or, carries a guy into the end zone, or literally just doesn't go down. I mean, how many times did they have to blow the whistle dead because the dude literally was stopped in his tracks but wouldn't go down? He'd get his helmet ripped off. He could get knocked out of bounds. He'd get right back up. I mean, he was just a freak of nature, really.
Oh, for sure. He's insane. He's still a beast. I mean, we watched him take a handoff from Jared Goff just for fun at the Rams training camp, and he still looks like he could play football. I mean, he's just insane, and I'm really happy that he got to retire Ram.
I am too. And I would be lying if that was so powerful. I got goosebumps when I saw Jared Goff hand off the ball to Steven Jackson. It was like part of me was like, I mean, it's not realistic, but part of me was like, can Jackson just sign like 1 year, just be on this roster, and like when they win the Super Bowl, he can get a Super Bowl? I mean, he deserves it.
Right.
But obviously that's not realistic. Still got it though. All right, so let's get into it because, we're talking about Steven Jackson, and he's probably not going to make this list, unfortunately, because it's just the starting lineup. So before everyone at home that's listening to this or, watching it, flips out, and just remember, it's just the starting lineup. So first off, quarterback, I'll let you start off. Who is going to be our starting quarterback? Because we're putting this team together.
On the all-time Rams starting lineup, it only seems fitting that we have my favorite Rams starting quarterback in history, Kurt Warner himself. I think not many people would argue that Kurt Warner deserves this spot. I think the story of Kurt Warner makes it all the more interesting and all the more powerful. But Kurt Warner was the quarterback of the only Super Bowl winning Rams team. And not only was he their quarterback, he was one, if not the only reason that they even made that Super Bowl. He was incredible in that 1999 season, but the reason that he's on this list is not just because he played that season very well. He played many, many other seasons very well. He was fun to watch. He was electric. He led the greatest show on turf for many years, and I think it's just well deserved. I think when you think of, Rams starting quarterback, you think of Kurt Warner.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I met the guy at Giants training camp because, he came to my neck of the woods. So I mean, just getting a picture with him, that's always going to be somewhat of a bias. I'm not going to lie here though, Jim Everett being on our podcast, it's also somewhat of a bias. And, I would definitely give him honorable mention, but it's definitely Kurt Warner. I look at guys like Norm Van Brocklin. I look at guys like Bob Waterfield, guys that did win back in the day with the Cleveland Rams. Don't get enough credit. But Kurt Warner gave the Rams their first Super Bowl. And, whether it's right or wrong, the NFL not really pushing NFL championships as like actually meaning anything. Kurt Warner won the granddaddy all for the Rams. He was the first one to do it. The Rams lost to the Steelers in the Super Bowl in 1979, and then they come back, years later. And I mean, this team loses their star quarterback in Trent Green, and it's in preseason on a meaningless play on a kind of a dirty hit by Rodney Harrison. Not really shocked there. But anyway, they lose Trent Green, and Dick Vermeil utters the, famous words, you know, we will rally around Kurt Warner and we will play good football. And they went from, I believe, 4-12 the year before with the same head coach to 13-3 and winning the Super Bowl on one of the craziest endings you'll ever see. But I mean, just Kurt Warner, up until Tom Brady's recent surge in the Super Bowl against the Eagles, had the three most impressive Super Bowl games. He had the three highest, passing games in Super Bowl history with the Rams and with the Cardinals. So I mean, this is somebody that, he gets put in like the top 15, top 20. It's all about longevity, because if this guy had a chance and didn't actually take so long to finally get that opportunity. Keep in mind, he did have a run in with the Falcons and with the Packers. But working at in a Hy-Vee grocery store, and then, basically, being the starting quarterback for a Super Bowl team. It's just unreal. It's one of the greatest stories in not only the history of football, it's one of the greatest stories in the history of sports. I mean, the fact that there hasn't been a movie on this is just mind-boggling to me. So, I mean, that should be the next movie. You want to talk about a sports movie? Make a Kurt Warner movie. I'd love to see that. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Great pick to start our roster and our starting lineup. And, Kurt Warner, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Roman Gabriel deserves some honorable mention, but Warner won the Rams the Super Bowl. And just his story alone is just enough to be like, okay, like it's got to be Warner.
Oh, 1,000% agree.
Yeah, so we move on to the running back position, and this is hard because the Rams have the best backfield of all time. You look, Marshall Faulk, Eric Dickerson, Todd Gurley now, Steven Jackson, as we mentioned. There's so many guys, Lawrence McCutcheon, Dan Towler. So there's a lot of guys out there. Who are we going to narrow this down to? I'm going to pick Marshall Faulk. We're going to stick with the greatest show on turf here. I know, Eric Dickerson fans are probably screaming at me right now, but hear me out. Marshall Faulk, Eric Dickerson was amazing, but Eric Dickerson was a running back only. Marshall Faulk was a running back, a receiver, and an extension of the coaching staff. It was like having another quarterback on the field. So when you look at what Marshall Faulk brought to the table, it's just rare. You just don't get a player like that. So, I'll keep Warner and Faulk together and, start this offense the right way. But I don't think any answer is wrong. I just would prefer a guy that can have 1,000 yards receiving and rushing, because not many guys can do that. Marshall Faulk also set the single season touchdown record that was broken, not long after, by LaDainian Tomlinson, who is a Hall of Famer. So, I think Marshall Faulk has to be it for me, but I could definitely see people going Eric Dickerson, and maybe someday, we'll be able to say Todd Gurley.
For sure. And I definitely think that Marshall Faulk, it's hard to use the word underrated when you're talking about a guy like Marshall Faulk. But in a way, I think if you're looking at all the key pieces of the greatest show on turf, He was not the most flashy. You had guys like Warner, Bruce, and Holt on that offense as well. But Marshall Falk was very efficient at basically everything he did. He was an efficient runner. He was an efficient blocker. He was an efficient receiver. Everything he did, he basically executed it to perfection almost every time. And I think it's actually kind of, for me, I think that's an easy pick. All-time Rams starting lineup for running back, Marshall Falk, easy answer.
Yeah, and then, I think you have to look at, obviously now the wide receiver position and, good luck picking your number one receiver out of this crop. Who you got?
Well, Jake, I've got to continue with this greatest show on turf run. My greatest wide receiver, all-time Rams starting lineup is got to be Isaac Bruce. Now, hear me out. Isaac Bruce, or Reverend Ike, whatever you want to call him, was another guy who, first off, somehow he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's not yet. Deserves to be. Probably the second most important piece to that Rams Super Bowl run, behind Kurt Warner. He was just an electric receiver. You could rely on him. He did everything you needed him to do. He was flashy. He was fun to watch. He was faithful to the Rams. He played with them his entire career, except his last year when he played in San Francisco. He's still very involved with the Rams, still very involved with St. Louis. You could go into all those things, but if you're looking at him as a player, he is a guy who was just electric. He was a guy who you hoped that you were not lined up against, and you hoped that you were on his team and not playing against him. And if you were playing against him, you had to be ready for it because he could get by you. He was fast. He was a good catcher, receiver, excuse me. But he just, when I think of Rams receivers, I mean, how can you not immediately think of Isaac Bruce, especially, in this era?
You didn't have to sell me on that. I'm totally in your boat there. With Isaac Bruce, I've been saying for a while. I mean, I'm the one that made the argument that I think he's better than Terrell Owens. I thought he deserved to make the Hall of Fame over him. I know Terrell Owens is, what do you want to call it, flashy. I know that, he was kind of the one-man rock band, with San Francisco at the point where, they had Arnaz Battle as the number 2 receiver. But I think it's unfair to credit somebody that is getting all the targets and discredit somebody that is not getting all the targets, because I think people use that and they don't use it the right way. The greatest show on turf didn't make any of them, okay? Marshall Faulk is still one of the greatest running backs of all time without the greatest show on turf. He proved that with the Colts. I mean, come on now. Now, Torrey Holt, he's one of the best receivers. The greatest show on turf didn't make Torrey Holt. It didn't make anything. All the greatest show on turf did, honestly, Isaac Bruce, his stats were a lot less than what they could have been had he not been sharing the spotlight with guys like Marshall Faulk, guys like, Torrey Holt, guys like even Hakeem. I mean, people don't think about that. They never use that argument. It's always about, well, he wasn't getting double teams because Torrey Holt was on the other side. Bro, let me just say this. Isaac Bruce had 1,700 receiving yards his second year in the league with Chris Miller and Mark Ripien.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all. That's it. That's the end of story. So he's already proven before the greatest show on turf even happens in 1996 that he was a great receiver. Oh, by the way, that same year, no Pro Bowl.
Right.
No Pro Bowl. And that was a theme throughout his career. And I don't know what the guy says behind the scenes. I mean, I know he seems like the nicest guy. You hung out with him. But for whatever reason, he's not in the Hall of Fame. He didn't get a lot of Pro Bowl, love. I mean, this is somebody that just has always been underrated. I think even to a degree, people rate Holt over Bruce because Holt was, big game Torrey Holt. But Isaac Bruce, you want a guy that is, an outstanding route runner, guy that plays above the rim at his size. I mean, he wasn't some giant 6'5" Megatron. I mean, he was 6 feet tall, 5'11", 6 feet, I don't get it. I will never understand it. One of the most complete receivers ever. and he is the one that gets the crap end of the stick. And the fact that he's not in the Hall of Fame is just atrocious, just
Oh,
ridiculous.
I think he'll get there. I think it's a shame that he hasn't already because he definitely deserves it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Um, So my next receiver, I'm going to obviously go with Torrey Holt. So we're starting off our all-time starting lineup with four greatest show on turf guys. Not bad for being one of the greatest offenses ever, maybe the greatest offense ever. Torrey Holt, I mean, 10 straight seasons of 1,000 yards receiving. He was incredible. He really was, and you know they got him at NC State. He was already a really, really talented prospect, but they added him to that greatest show on turf team. His rookie year, he made an impact. This is somebody that instantly was ready to go. There wasn't really a learning curve with him. He just kind of jumped in, was that guy. Another guy about, I think he was 6 feet tall, 6'1", really did a nice job playing above the rim. I thought he was one of the best, jump ball guys in the NFL. And he still, to a degree, kind of got overlooked because there was Randy Moss, there was Marvin Harrison, there was Chad Johnson. I mean, there were all these different receivers that were in his class, and noticed the guy that was on the Rams kind of got pushed below them. When in reality, I think he was better than Chad Johnson. I do think he had an argument at the time with Moss. Keep in mind, Moss had that I guess like that sequence in his career where like you didn't know where he was going. After he was gone from the Minnesota Vikings, he went to the Raiders, and it was kind of like, what's going on here? Kind of similar to Antonio Brown, right? It's like the same exact circumstance. But I mean, really, I think Torrey Holt has gotten overlooked. Bruce has his whole career, but I thought Holt was definitely overlooked. And I think, you saw that with a lot of guys. I mean, it's funny how that is, but Holt should definitely be a Hall of Famer. Obviously you picked Bruce. I think Bruce should be a Hall of Famer before Holt. But I mean, yeah, I think starting your offense, and obviously this happened, but starting your offense off with Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt is the way to go. And I mean, don't get me wrong, we could have said Henry Ellard, we could have said, Tom Fears, somebody like that. But, I think Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce are the two best Rams receivers all time.
They are, and we're going to go with the third here. We've got our quarterback, running back. We've got two receivers. We've got one more, but we're gonna change the pace. We're not gonna go with someone from the greatest show on turf. Now,
Oh, finally.
were there some other good receivers from the greatest show on turf? Of course, you got guys like you mentioned, Hakeem, Ricky Prohl, that we could have, maybe put in this third spot, but we're not going to go with the greatest show on turf. We're going to throw it back, way back to Elroy Hirsch. Now, he is a guy that probably maybe newer Rams fans probably aren't going to know who this is. Maybe they will. Maybe they've heard the name a little bit, especially if you come from a family of a lifelong Rams fanhood. But Elroy Hirsch is a guy who, is someone who, I have to be honest, this is a guy who I first learned about just by looking up Rams stats. Not a guy I had heard of, not a guy who I'd even seen film on, but I looked him up. I looked at his stats. I mean, 54 touchdowns, 8.3 yards per catch, put up 66 receptions, and he had 1,495 yards, 17 touchdowns in a 12-game season. I mean, that's insane. I mean, that's
in an era where that never happened. That was just beyond its time. It's right. Yeah, it's crazy. No, I love the pick. I do.
I'm pretty sure his nickname was Crazy Legs.
It was Crazy Legs. Yeah. And there's actually a movie. I don't remember what it's called. It's probably called Crazy Legs Hirsch or something. But I actually watched it on YouTube. It's actually a pretty good movie. It's about Elroy Hirsch, and I'm pretty sure he plays himself in it. And it's a good movie. I think they filmed it like during the Rams season. It's in black and white, but I mean, so is Twilight Zone. And if you don't like Twilight Zone, you're not my friend. So with that being said, Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch, let me just tell you this, okay? America's pastime, that's considered baseball. Baseball, they do such a great job at preserving history. I mean, just go to Cooperstown. If you've never been, you have to go. There's so much history that has been preserved by the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, unfortunately, I'm not trying to rag on the Football Hall of Fame because I don't think it's their fault, but I don't feel like the NFL does enough to really push guys like Elroy Hirsch. I mean, he had one of the most dominant seasons for an offensive skill position player ever in an era where, I mean, they played 12 games. You said it yourself. He had 17 touchdowns. He had 1,400 receiving yards on 66 receptions. That was not the game back then. It was a running game. It was that's all it was. So he came in and just completely changed the course of it. And it's like this guy, people don't even know who he is. It's crazy. Crazy legs. Come on.
And
So
with that, Jake, you gotta throw in the tight end here because we gotta know who this is.
yeah, so this is my boy. He's been on the podcast before. I'm definitely I would definitely say I'm friends with him and a couple of his family members. Joe, Joe Holohan. It's Pete Holohan. So shout out to Joe because Joe actually got me the interview with Pete. Pete Holohan wasn't with the Rams long, okay? But when he was with the Rams, he put up 159 catches, 1,625 yards, 7 touchdowns. That was pretty much better than his time with the Chargers. Now, hear me out here. Pete Holohan was also in an era where tight ends just they weren't like Gronkowski. They weren't a focal point of an offense. You put Pete Holohan in today's league, he might have been one of the best receiving tight ends in football. So, again, I just don't think, and that's why it's so hard to compare guys like that. I don't feel like Pete Holohan gets enough credit because he wasn't with the Rams for like 10 years, right? But it just such a short amount of time, he made such an impact. And I know Billy Truex is a guy that people will slam the table for. Old-time Rams fans will absolutely slam the table for. I lean Pete Holohan. I think, again, had he played in this era, I mean, he would have been special. And he had tight ends just were used as blockers. So, I mean, even those stats at that time, those are really good stats. So I'm going Pete Holohan.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I think I mean, stats don't lie. I mean, and like you said, you put him, in today's day and age, what he could do. So I think it's a good pick. Again, other people might, disagree with that one, but I think it's good. And with
Mm.
that, I'm going to move on to the left tackle position. And it's really not even close for me on who the best Rams left tackle of all time is. Everybody should know this answer already, and it's Orlando Pace. Orlando Pace is a freak in the best sense of the word. I've seen him in person. I've stood next to him in person. He is just this huge guy. There's no other way to put it. And when you watch him play, he absolutely mauled past people. There's a reason that he invented the pancake. He was absolutely lethal at left tackle. It was very hard to get by him. He destroyed people. He showed no mercy. And there's a reason that he is in the Hall of Fame. I mean, Orlando Pace, he's just incredible. And I think it was a very easy pick to put him at left tackle.
Just like it was easy for the Rams to trade up for the Ohio State product. I mean, Orlando Pace is one of the greatest football prospects ever. I mean, when you look at like this is the thing I want to bring up because I know people were comparing Greg Robinson to Orlando Pace back in the day when the Rams did select Greg Robinson. And I just was looking at them like, did you watch Orlando Pace's college film? Because guess what? He only got better as time went on, and he's considered like, when you're talking about quarterbacks and they'll be like, oh, the best prospect since John Elway or since Peyton Manning, right? Those are the guys they use. Left tackle, it's Munoz and it's Orlando Pace and Jonathan Ogden. It's those three guys that are named. Orlando Pace is one of the greatest left tackles of all time. He's a Hall of Famer. Wish he would have gone in the Hall of Fame with Kurt Warner. I feel like they did that on purpose, but I won't go there. Orlando Pace is the greatest left tackle in Rams history. It's not close. Had Jackie Slater played left tackle, then you would have had a legit argument. But Jackie Slater, despite some people, because I see it all the time, Jackie Slater left tackle, I see people say that, across message boards and on Twitter. Jackie Slater played right tackle.
Mhm.
So, and actually back in the day, your best tackle was on the right side. It's changed now. Obviously, you want to protect that blind side. But back in the day, it was the right side, and that's why Jackie Slater played there. So this is again great pick. It's obviously Orlando Pace, and I mean there's not really anyone even close. I mean honorable mention would probably go to Whitworth, honestly, just because of the talent he is. But you're not getting Whitworth in his prime. You're getting Whitworth when he was on the Rams, and he's towards the end of his prime, which even still, he's one of the best tackles in football. But I mean, Orlando Pace was arguably the best. I think the only one that you could argue against him was probably Jonathan Ogden of the Baltimore Ravens, but at his time, of course. But yeah, I mean, he was the best for the Rams, so I love that pick. I'm actually going to go, and people are going to hate me for this. Like old school Los Angeles Rams fans are going to hate me for this, but I'm going to go not Dennis Hara. I'm going to go Roger Saffold. And I know I'm going to get so much hate. I mean, we haven't said anyone of current, and like we didn't even mention Todd Gurley or anybody like that. Going Roger Saffold. The guy is just, I mean, he was unreal. Okay. He was the 33rd overall pick in the 2010 draft, the same year to protect Sam Bradford, left tackle, right? Well, it didn't work out. Okay. They realized he was more of a guard. And as far as talent, Roger Saffold is one of the most talented guards in football right now. He's with the Tennessee Titans now, but Roger Saffold with the Rams was just, I mean, he was really he's a physical freak, in my opinion. Guy gets to the second level like it's no problem at all. He's got so much power. And honestly, his issue was injuries. Well, once he got that shot in his shoulder, the cortisone shot or whatever, or he had surgery or something like that, I swear to God, the dude stopped getting injuries and he just buckled down and became one of the best guards in football. Look, I would absolutely put Dennis Hara here, but I want to give Roger Saffold the credit because without Roger Saffold, the Rams are not in the Super Bowl this past year. Okay. Roger Saffold actually signed a deal with the Oakland Raiders in free agency. It was because of a failed physical on that same shoulder we're talking about, is how he ended up re-signing with the St. Louis Rams, going to Los Angeles, and becoming one of the best guards in football. And for that reason, I'm going to give him some love. You could make the argument for Dennis Hara. I had Dennis Hara up until this point, and this is just kind of like a thank you to Roger Saffold. So I'm saying Saffold. I'm expecting to get so much hate for it, but I mean, you can't go wrong. He's still he's a great guard.
Yeah, I like that pick actually. I think for nostalgia reasons, and if especially if you're thinking of guys who really kind of embody being a Ram, I think you can definitely think of Roger Saffold, the guy who played in the good times, guy who played in the bad times, and in my opinion, pretty much kept up the consistency and performed well for us. So I don't hate that pick. But for center now, I'm throwing it back again. I'm going way back again, and I'm going Doug Smith with center. Now, again, probably a guy that not many current Rams fans might know, but he was, um, how would I describe this? I would say he's probably a guy that he wasn't flashy, but he was consistent. He did his business, he did his job. He helped protect the quarterback. He was a six-time Pro Bowler. He played 160 games. There's not really another center, in my opinion, for the Rams that kind of comes close to that type of consistency. So for that reason, I'm going with Doug Smith.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you there. The only other one that I would really say is Rich Saul, who was actually the center before Doug Smith. I got a lot of flack for writing Doug Smith in my all-time rankings on, it was like 2 years ago on DTR. I did an all-time Rams list over Rich Saul. And, I think it's close, but I feel like Doug Smith was a better center than Rich Saul. That's just me. I think you could go either one, but I do really like Doug Smith, and so I like that pick. My next one is going to be a Hall of Famer. It's going to be a guy that had 11 Pro Bowls. It's going to be a guy that's, he's played in 162 games, and that's Tom Mack. You're just getting reliability. You're getting like a total. I mean, he's basically a stone wall in itself. Obviously, again, I'm already hearing the hate I'm going to get with Dennis Hara not being on here. But Tom Mack is a no-brainer, Hall of Famer. Again, 11-time Pro Bowler. And this isn't an era where like guys would make all pro lists and they wouldn't make the Pro Bowl. And he made the Pro Bowl 11 times. So I don't know. I mean, he's one of the best ever. Obviously, he was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1999. So I would definitely say him. Solidify that guard position. So we have him and Saffold. We have Pace and Smith, and I'm pretty sure I know who your right tackle is. But let me know who it is.
Well, another Hall of Famer, one you mentioned earlier, and it's Jackie Slater. I mean, how can it not be Jackie Slater when you're talking about all-time Rams right tackles? I mean, 211 games, 20 years, 7 Pro Bowls. The guy was the real deal. Again, not even close, kind of like Orlando Pace. He is the best Rams right tackle of all time, and for the foreseeable future, I mean, he might be for a while.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm not even going to say he'll ever get to this point, but I mean, Havenstein might be worth an honorable mention down the road. Yeah, I mean, like you said, he played 20 years for the same team.
Crazy.
That's just unheard of. When you get to the 200 game mark, that's just unreal. So Jackie Slater, I mean, I obviously you literally can't go wrong with Jackie Slater. So obviously great pick there. We're going to start off the defense now. And so the Rams, while they've had so many prolific offensive players, now we go to the defense where they have a guy who's the best in the NFL right now. They have a guy that literally coined the term the sack. They have all sorts of talent that we're going to talk about, but we're going to go into the guy that coined the term the sack. That's Deacon Jones. So Deacon Jones, because he coined the term the sack, they didn't have sacks back in the day. When you tackled the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage, it didn't count as anything, unfortunately, for Deacon, because Deacon Jones probably would have set the record for sacks. I forget who, but someone back in, went through all the archives, or they claim that they went through all the archives, and he ended up with more sacks than the leading all-time sack leader right now, Bruce Smith. So kind of gives you an idea. Deacon Jones, like the headliner of the Fearsome Foursome Rams. Keep in mind, though, the Fearsome Foursome Rams were insane. I mean, Merlin Olsen, Lamar Lundy, Rosie Greer. No one talks about Coy Bacon, the most the most forgotten Ram on that defensive line, and he's never mentioned in that Fearsome Foursome category. But they had so much talent there. So we're gonna start this off. Deacon Jones, no brainer at defensive end.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a total no-brainer. Like you said, had the stack kind of been around at that time, he would hold the record for that. Absolutely insane. A guy who many people have heard of him for a good reason. And with this next defensive tackle, it should be no surprise to anybody that this all-time Rams starting defensive tackle is Aaron Donald. Again, it's really not even close. I mean, the guy come into the league has been insane. He's been a legend. He has basically changed the way that people have played the defensive tackle position. And I don't really care what anybody says. He's the best player in the NFL right now. So Aaron Donald, there's really nothing more that I can say there. He is the best Rams defensive tackle of all time. And in my opinion, will be, when he's retired, the best defensive tackle of all time.
Yeah, so you're not going to get any argument from me that Aaron Donald is the best defensive tackle in the NFL. He's the best player in the NFL. And I just came out with my DTR 100, which is kind of like a spinoff of the NFL 100, but it's all my stuff. And I have Donald number 1. Call me a homer all you want, but then the NFL the NFL 100 just named Donald the number 1 player according to the player voting. So now he's number 1. We've seen Tom Brady like every year, and now Donald's finally getting his recognition that he deserves. Donald did play for, some okay, mediocre teams. And then, the McVay era came along and now he's starting to really get recognized. But, the bottom line is Donald was unbelievable before last season. But last season, being a defensive tackle, when you're an interior defensive lineman, you should never come close to breaking the sack record. Donald had 20 and a half sacks. He didn't record a sack until week 4. He's getting better. This guy is unbelievable. He's getting better. I mean, have you ever seen a defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman, defensive tackle that had he was ripped to the core? I mean, he's got 6-pack abs. This guy takes care of himself. He just loves football. I mean, he's all business. The Rams already extended him. The sky's truly the limit. I mean, and now he's gotten his taste of what it's like to play in a Super Bowl. It's going to be scary, vengeance Aaron Donald in 2019. So I love this pick because Aaron Donald makes so much sense. But we got to get him a running mate because we're actually going to do a 4-3 defense. Figure this was going to be easier when we were looking at this. Figured 4-3 would be easier than a 3-4. So we'll keep it simple. We'll do 4-3. Have Deacon Jones, have Aaron Donald, Merlin Olsen, Hall of Famer, 208 games played, 94 sacks. We're talking about a 9-time All-Pro player. I had the pleasure of speaking with his brother, Phil, and I mean, Merlin Olsen is just one of the greatest ever. And honestly, at this point, while Donald is unbelievable, I don't know if I would have put Donald number 1 over Merlin Olsen because I feel like he's not quite there yet. He might be, but Merlin Olsen was just another level. That's why the fearsome foursome stand the test of time, even in the 60s, right? Because you talk about Deacon Jones invented the term sack. Merlin Olsen was a defensive lineman that had almost 100 sacks, right? So, I mean, just looking at like the talent that they had there, it's just crazy. And so now you add Aaron Donald, Merlin Olsen, Deacon Jones, and your defensive line is one of the best that a team can really put together. The Rams have, despite only having 1 Super Bowl and 2 NFL titles to their credit, they have some of the greatest players to ever play this sport under their branch. And I mean, no one can take that away from them. But now we'll go over to the last defensive end position because we have Deacon Jones on one side, who's starting across from him.
It's got to be the one, the only Jack Youngblood, Jake. I mean, is it even a question? Again, one of those guys who, quite frankly, you just expect to be there. I mean, 188 starts, 151 and a half career sacks, and a 7-time Pro Bowler. His numbers retired by the Rams. He was just, again, an insane guy, a defensive genius, and no doubt that he deserves to be on the all-time Rams starting lineup.
Yeah, and he played with a broken leg too.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's one of those things that just doesn't like process with me. I mean, I just I can't even deal with that. Like I couldn't play with a sprained ankle in my baseball game. Okay. Like he played with a broken leg, Alexis. Like, what is that? No, I love the pick. Obviously, Jack Youngblood was he's one of the all-time great Rams. He's one of the most recognizable names to this organization. Honorable mention would probably go to Kevin Greene. Kevin Greene kind of gets the crap end of the stick here because you're not going to put him over Deacon Jones. Honestly, if there was ever a tiebreaker, I'm giving it to the guy that wants to be considered a Ram over the guy that views himself as a Steeler. Love Kevin Greene. Love the fact, once a Ram, always a Ram. But the dude literally said he views himself as a Steeler more than a Ram, despite only playing 3 or 4 seasons with the Steelers. So I like your pick there. I would go with that pick for sure. Since this is a 4-3 defense, it kind of just spoiled that Kevin Greene will not be making an appearance on the starting lineup. He would be the next man up on the defensive line. We're going to go to linebacker, the late, great Isaiah Robertson. First off, shout out to him. I say late because he just passed away I believe it was last year. He's actually scheduled to come on the podcast even before I met you, and he actually he got into a vehicle accident and died in the accident. So, really unfortunate there. One of the greatest linebackers ever. And I mean, it really sucked. We were in constant communication and he was going to come on the show that week. So that still kind of hits. But again, late great, 6-time Pro Bowler. The problem is with him and statistics, there were no tackles being recorded. So like he was just doing, I mean, he was unreal. His rookie year, I mean, I believe he had around 20 interceptions to his credit throughout his whole career, which is incredible for being a linebacker. He would absolutely be one of the best linebackers in today's NFL. And he kind of reminds me, like watching him play and watching Bobby Wagner play, I do see similarities. Don't get me wrong, Bobby Wagner has like the modern, like, nutrition and like he's a modern day athlete, but Isaiah Robertson is a very underrated linebacker, and he's one of the best all time that's never talked about. So I'm going to go with Isaiah Robertson to start this linebacker group off, and of course, rest in peace.
Yes, of course. He is a great pick. Definitely agree. Deserves to be there. Such a fun guy, just to watch clips of. And like you said, that was even before tackles were being recorded, which is insane to think that that was never a stat. But the next linebacker that I'm going to bring up, forgive me if I butcher this last name because I always do, but it's Les Richter.
No, you didn't butcher it. That's how you say it.
And this is a guy who honestly, I was not super aware of until this, but he's a guy who the Rams literally traded 11 players to acquire him, which is something that you would never see today. I mean, that is an insane number of guys to give up for one player. He's an 8-time Pro Bowler, and just a beast, all around. He's got, a lot of crazy stats, things like that, but it just seems like he is someone who a lot of old school Rams fans have a lot of fond memories of. And I think, in my opinion, most people would agree that he deserves to be on this list.
Yeah. 11 players. That little tidbit just kills me every time. The Rams knew, I mean, he was one of those impact players, and they knew they had to get him. Trading 11 players for a guy, I mean, that guy must be pretty damn good. And of course, he was Les Richter. So, Hall of Famer, I mean, 8-time Pro Bowler, what else can you say? Moving on, this is going to shock people because I was looking at my old lists and I've changed my mind. I'm going with James Laurinaitis to start on this linebacker group. I don't think he gets enough credit because he played in St. Louis, and there are still, I love all the Rams fans, right? But there's still some LA Rams fans that don't recognize that St. Louis Rams happened. And I don't think that's fair to guys like James Laurinaitis that gave their blood, sweat, and tears every single down for their team. He's the all-time Rams leading tackler. I mean, this guy played in 112 games, okay? He wanted to move to LA with them. I mean, he wanted to be on this team. He was cut. And guess what? He was cut when he was in the facility working overtime when no one else was in the facility. So we said crap end of the stick, or I've said crap end of the stick a lot on this show, but James Laurinaitis definitely got that. And don't get me wrong, when he went to the Saints, he definitely, threw a thing or two at Jeff Fisher. Not saying he was wrong. But, I respect the hell out of James Laurinaitis. I appreciate what he did. He was a constant 100 tackle plus guy every single year. He was never the supreme athlete of, the guys in the league today with like a Jalen Smith. He wasn't like a super athlete, but hard-nosed player at Ohio State, second round. I mean, I remember when they picked him. I absolutely love that pick. His father was the Animal from WWF. So, I mean, it's just, he's got like all this crazy stuff going for him. And I just remember watching him in college at Ohio State. And I was like, when the Rams picked him, I'm like, wow, they're getting a guy. Like, I hate to sound cliche, but he was your typical blue collar, hard nosed linebacker that, and I hate using the G word, but he was a grinder. And I mean, this is somebody that absolutely was the heart and soul of this Rams defense. Obviously they had Chris Long, but James Laurinaitis, to me, I think overshadowed Chris Long. Chris Long was the king of, in my opinion, the almost sack, right? Like he put a lot of pressure on, gave a lot of opportunities to guys like Robert Quinn. And I just feel like James Laurinaitis was always, he had a nose for the football. And when he had, that UCL injury, he had the shoulder injury. You remember he was wearing that giant shoulder cast. That was really the end of the James Laurinaitis we knew. But still, you didn't hear any complaining. The dude went out, tried to perform, his best at 100%. He was not 100%. And that's why, to me, James Laurinaitis absolutely deserves recognition, and he makes this starting lineup.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree that he deserves to be on this list. Like you mentioned, a guy who just gave everything he had, every down, every play. He, unfortunately, had to go through many, many rough years in St. Louis. The team was not great. For a lot of different reasons. And then obviously, like you said, he ended up in the end getting cut by the Rams, which was unfortunate and not fair, but it's the way it is. But he definitely deserves to be on this list. And like, not a flashy guy, but a guy who has, produced results. Like you said, he is the Rams' all-time leading tackler for a reason. So definitely worthy of being on this list. And now we're going to go to the cornerback position, and we're going to go with the guy who, again, it's not even close. We're going with Dick Night Train Lane. I mean, when you think of a Rams cornerback, you think of a classic Rams corner. Of course, you think of Night Train Lane. I mean, 7 Pro Bowls, 68 interceptions. The guy was just a freak. He was fun to watch. And really kind of, an original, I believe he was an original LA Ram. I think he played in that, original inaugurating season in LA. I could be wrong. But I mean, just a guy who was, stats don't lie. And if you ask any faithful Rams fan who one of the best Rams corners of all time is, they're going to tell you Night Train Lane.
Yeah, he's one of the best corners ever. And it's so funny. He's got the all-time single season interceptions record that I don't think is going to be broken. You don't see guys in today's era really ever get to double-digit interceptions, but when they do, they don't get to. I believe he has 14, which is just insane. But I'm sorry, this guy has like the coolest story of how he became a football player. Do you know the story? He literally was just like, I don't like my job. I'm going to try out for football. And then he became one of the best cornerbacks ever. Like he actually tried out for receiver, and they're like, we like you at corner. And sure enough, it worked out for him. So I love the pick. My next one is a little biased. I'm not going to lie. I've been to his freaking birthday party. He's been on the podcast numerous times. He's a friend of mine. Leroy Irvin. Look, I could have said Jerry Gray here. I know there's people that are flipping out at me for not saying Jerry Gray, but I'll make the argument for Leroy Irvin. You talk about a guy that can instantly be our punt returner and kick returner on this team. He was one of the best returners of that era. And then, he had 34 interceptions. Okay. He had 5 that he took back to the house. And let's not forget, he was a 4-time All-Pro player. So I know people look at him as he's a returner, but he was more than that. And again, Jerry Gray was probably more of the cover guy as he had less interceptions and was more of a shutdown corner. But we're going, go big or go home. I'm going with Leroy Irvin, to bring, we're going to literally have interception city here with, Dick Night Train Lane and Leroy Irvin. Interceptions galore. And again, he's our return guy. So I'm going Leroy Irvin, and I love the guy. So again, I don't care if I'm biased. He was great.
Um, Definitely agree with this pick. Again, shout out Leroy. He's awesome. We follow each other on Twitter. Everyone should follow him, by the way, if you aren't
Oh
already.
yeah.
But he is just a great player, a great guy. He was a freak of an athlete. He was more than a returner, as you said. So I like the pick. And next, we're gonna go to the free safety position, and we gotta go with Eddie Meador. He's the franchise record holder for interceptions, blocked kicks, fumble recoveries, and he was a 6-time Pro Bowler. The guy was a beast. He was a physical freak, and he's well deserving of being on the all-time Rams starting lineup.
Yeah, That's not going to get any argument from me. He blocked 10 kicks. I don't even think that's really. I don't think anybody's even close to that in today's era. And don't get me wrong, it's a different era, but 10 block kicks is insane. He has the single season record for block kicks. He has the single season Rams record for interceptions. And he has 46 all time interceptions. So, this is somebody. I had Roman Gabriel on the show, and he was very quick to be like, don't forget Eddie Meter. This is somebody that absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame, and he's not. And he is the Rams all-time leader in interceptions. He knew that. He was very quick to shout him out on the show. So I love the pick. I'm going to follow it up and close out this whole awesome segment because I'm so glad we did this. I think it's been a lot of fun. I'm going to close it out. Oh, by the way, Leroy Irvin was a Kansas Jayhawk. And the reason I bring that up is because Nolan Cromwell is from Kansas, a Kansas alumni. As you guys know, I am a Kansas Jayhawk fan. And Nolan Cromwell, 37 interceptions, 4-time Pro Bowler, and 11-year career with the Rams. Played his whole career with the Rams. He's one of the best. I honestly, I love him. I'm picking him. I mean, there's so many interceptions to go around. I mean, we basically have the all-time leader in interceptions for Rams history. We have a guy that had 34 interceptions that took 5 of them back in Leroy Irvin. We have Night Train Lane, who had 68 interceptions. Now we had Nolan Cromwell, who had 37 interceptions. Talk about a beefy secondary and a secondary you don't want to throw on. That's why I'm going with Nolan.
Great pick. Absolute stud. Definitely deserves to be on this list. And yeah, I mean, you think of Rams safety all time, you definitely got to mention Nolan Cromwell. But we did it. We made it through all of the positions. Real quick, I think we can both agree on a kicker. Jake, who would
Oh,
rank?
yeah. Well, actually, I don't know who you're gonna pick. I'm sticking. Here's the thing: recency bias is Zerline, right?
Mhm.
Wilkins was great, and I also have to shout out friend of the podcast, Mike Lansford. If you don't know who that is, he's the barefoot kicker. Yeah, he's got a whole story on that. Pretty awesome stuff. But I will stick with Greg Zerline because this guy's gonna break the all-time record for longest field goal. It's coming. I don't know when it's going to come, but it is coming. And he brought the Rams to the Super Bowl. If he misses that field goal, the Saints still could have had a chance of winning. So I'm going to go Greg Zerline. And then I think the punter is the most obvious one. Johnny Hecker's the greatest punter of all time. And he's not even done with his career. So Johnny Hecker.
I agree. Well, we did it. Thanks for listening. We got our all-time Rams starting lineup, and of course, if there's something that you think we missed or someone that we missed, feel free to tweet us because I think again this is something that some of these people might disagree.
Yeah. And for those of you that are watching, this is our first time doing video. So, not our first time. It's definitely not our first rodeo. I mean, you were in the picture the last time. This is our first time doing this thing. But
Right.
I think it went relatively well. I guess we'll find out. But if you guys like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Also, if you want some DTR merch, you want the McVeigh 2020 shirt, any merch like that, it's all over social media. It's plastered all over social media. And be sure to check out my DTR 100, please. I spent a lot of time on that. So thank you guys so much, and you guys take care.